So good. Got a full tray here. Meat styrofoam. Hello, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So we have been homesteading here on our 9.21 acres for about 5 years. And I've been preserving food ever since 2019. It's not very long, but it's long enough to have established patterns. I've been growing a garden for, this is my 6th summer. My first garden year, I grew, for some reason, 15 cucumber plants. And if you guys have had a garden before with cucumbers in it, you understand that that is a lot of cucumber plants. So that first summer, I got to learn how to make pickles. I made many jars of pickles and relish and things. And it was in that summer that I learned that if I didn't preserve something every single day during the growing season, that I was going to get behind. So some of you may have heard of the open collaboration put on by Three Rivers Homestead. It's called the Every Little Bit Counts Challenge. And during this challenge, anyone, you don't have to have a farm or homestead, but people are challenged to preserve something, however small, every single day in the month of August. So today, the first day of filming, is actually August 2nd. I didn't remember until last night about this challenge because, like I said, this is something that I have to do pretty much all the time during the growing season. It's about June when I realized, hey, I need to be preserving something every day, and this will go through October. So yesterday I actually did quite a bit of preserving. I want to share what I did with you, and then we'll be kind of tackling today's preservation tasks. So right now, at the moment, our greenhouse is growing most of our nightshades. That's tomatoes and peppers, eggplants, and I even have some tomatillos and some ground cherries in there. And unfortunately, my greenhouse isn't doing so awesome. I am still getting a few tomatoes, but nothing like the crop that I had expected. And so basically with every single large tomato that I'm getting this year, I am making a roasted salsa. And I am sure that I will do this again before the collaboration ends. So the fact that I didn't get to film this isn't a big deal. We will cover it at some point this month. But this is a roasted salsa using our tomatoes, our peppers, our elephant garlic, our cilantro, and then some store-bought onions because I can't grow it all. At least I don't try to grow it all. But yeah, I got a batch of that canned up, and I also harvested and canned up some Kalima bush beans. Now, we have been growing this particular patch of beans since before our last frost of the season, and these plants are still cranking out a ton of beans. It's actually been quite amazing. Again, this is the Kalima bush bean variety. They can up really well. These are a lot like the beans that I can remember my mom buying from the store. I really like the texture of canned beans. I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but we really like it. So I got actually 4 quarts of this canned up yesterday. Another thing that I managed to at least start yesterday was some preservation of milk. So we don't only have a lot of gardens, we have a lot of dairy goats. And this is yesterday's milk. It is now turned into chevre cheese, and I need to strain it. Yesterday was actually one of the hottest days that we've had this year, if not the hottest day. And I really need to get to making a hard cheese. I have a bunch of milk stored up in the fridge, and I didn't want to get that started yesterday. That was almost a disaster. Because to make a hard cheese, you do kind of have to stand over a pot of warm milk for a little while, at least an hour, and when it's 115 degrees outside, it doesn't sound like a fun time. So what I did with yesterday's milk, instead of adding it to the fridge, was put in some chevre culture. And one of the things that I really love about making chevre cheese, especially with having dairy animals on the homestead, is I don't have to do any heating of anything. I can take it straight out of the goat, strain it, and put it in these jars, add my culture, put on the lids, and just set it to the side, and the milk is preserved. Now I do have to strain it. As you can see, I have this butter muslin down here. Hang it up on the cabinet here and let it drain. Now there's a whole bunch of things that can be done with this leftover whey. A lot of times I'll just choose to feed it to the animals. It's great for that. I have been making a lot of things lately as far as breads and things goes, and the protein in this whey and really the nutrition in this whey is really great to add to things like bread. And I'm actually fermenting quite a lot lately, and we can use this sweet whey that's been cultured with this mesophilic chevre culture in order to give our fermentation a little bit of a head start. So being that this is the first nice day that we've had in a while and I really need a garden day and I really need to mow the lawn, I am again not going to be making hard cheese today, but we will do that soon. So I think today, to meet our quota, we'll ferment these cucumbers. Now as far as this collaboration goes, I probably won't do it like a daily how-to of how I am, like the exact steps on how to do things like fermenting and cheese making. I'm just going to show you what I'm doing, and then at the end of the video each week I'll link some videos that help further explain the in-depth processes of how to do these kinds of things. One of the reasons that I enjoy fermentation of vegetables so much is that I really enjoy the flavor of dill, and in my opinion the lacto fermented flavor that you get just from the vegetables being in the brine is much like the flavor of dill without having to have any dill on hand at all. Right now my dill has gone by. There are little baby dill plants out there, but I'm not going to pick from them right now. I really want them to be able to be stronger for later on in the season. Not all cucumber varieties lend themselves well to pickles. And when you will can pickles, like with heat processing, even if you do a low temp pasteurization, certain varieties just can't hold up to that. So in my experience, fermenting the vegetables that might be a little bit questionable when they're heat treated is a good way to ensure that they're going to stay as crispy as possible. So I think we are going to manage to squeeze all these in here. Yep, we got it. I actually just did a quick Google search to see if you could ferment vegetables with straight whey, not just using whey as a starter, but to ferment it fully in whey. And it looks like you can. It's just a little bit less stable than doing it with a salt brine plus the whey. And so I'm just gonna play it safe. Bay leaves are good for flavor as well as their tannins for retaining some of that crispness in the cucumber. There we go. Got a little whey. The rest brine, covering them up. There we go. These need to sit for a little while, about 5 days to a week. Today's preservation is done. Good morning. It is the next day, so we are Saturday the 3rd, and today I have a few rabbits to put in the freezer. So it was a week ago that we butchered 6 rabbits. We've eaten 2, and I've got 4 to put in the freezer. Actually, one of my favorite ways to preserve rabbit is to put them up in cans, but I have probably at least 20, maybe even 30 quarts of canned rabbit, so I do not need any more of this. So in the freezer they go. Now, we have packaged up meat for the freezer in a few different ways. The most important thing to remember is that if there's air in the package when you put it in the freezer, that just allows a space for freezer burn to kind of take hold. So I'm going to be vacuum sealing before I put them in the freezer. I have these oddly narrow vacuum seal bags, and this is going to fit 1 rabbit perfectly. There we go. I think you can see why it would fit perfectly. So I'm just going to take this kitchen towel here and dry them off. When we let our rabbit age in the fridge, we do so inside a salt brine, and that moisture is fine to be on the rabbit, really. But when I use the vacuum sealer, the vacuum sealer is not only going to suck out the air, but it will suck out that moisture, and I don't want to make too much of a mess. If you didn't have a vacuum sealer, you can take, regular freezer bags, put the meat in, and then dunk it in water, and just the pressure of the water on the outside of the bag will push the air out of the top, and you can just dunk it as low as you can into the water and then zip it sealed, and that does pretty well too. And what I've done here is just made sure I triple sealed the top of the bag to make sure that we don't allow any air in, and I just need to label it. We can put it in the freezer. This past fall, we actually took 3 of our pigs to the butcher, and when we got the meat back, the butcher had it vac packed like this, but it was double bagged. with certain animals, especially things with small bones, you can get the bag can puncture with the bones, and so you can either double bag it or you can cut little pieces of the vacuum seal bag and place it over the sharper points, and that will help protect the outside bag. Another trick that I've used with rabbits specifically is you can actually tuck up a rabbit, its back legs up into the ribs right there, and that helps keep the bones away from the plastic. So as I was attempting to put those rabbits in the freezer, I realized that I have way too big of a collection of bones, and it's time to make bone broth. So that is definitely one thing about raising your own meat, is you're raising whole animals. You're not just raising chicken breast, you're not just raising boneless roast. All of the animals obviously have all of their bones, and so dealing with bones is something that we have to think about all year round. So we will be preserving this bone broth in different ways other than filling up the freezer. But first I need to make it. So I've got the bones in there with some apple cider vinegar and lots of water. Threw in some peppercorns, we're gonna throw in some bay leaves, and then I'm going to take probably 2 heads of garlic and crush up the cloves and put that in here as well. And then this will simmer for at least a day. It might simmer for a little bit longer, and then we'll can it and put it in the freeze dryer. Good morning, it is the 4th, and I wanted to show you how our bone broth is doing. Today we are going to do the roasted salsa. Here's the bone broth. It's not even been 24 hours, and it looks so good. So we're gonna leave this to simmer probably for another day. And here, as far as our roasted salsa goes, I have some tomatoes, we have some elephant garlic, some onion. I need to preheat this to 350. And we need to go harvest the peppers. I haven't introduced our new kitten, Monty, to the channel yet. He is such a sweetie. He loves coming to the greenhouse, so we'll bring him with. Whew, it's already hot in here, so we'll be fast. I've been harvesting quite a bit, making this salsa, so I don't have anything of good enough size to harvest on this tamdu jalapeno. This plant has a couple. So what I'm gonna do is harvest these jalapenos for flavor. And then I have these peppers here, which are kind of a mystery. I had planted them as jalapenos, but they're not. They're something else, but they are hot. There. That'll do. All I'm gonna do is cut these peppers in half. I am gonna leave the seeds in. I am taking the little stem bit off. Just gonna kind of arrange them on the tray. I will try to divide them up to make sure that both trays get an even amount of hot and sweet peppers. I'm gonna sprinkle on some of this farm dust seasoning. It's got salt and pepper and a couple other herbs. Now my oven isn't quite preheated yet, but that's going to be fine. We're close. I'm just gonna stick these in here. And then these guys are gonna roast in here at 350 for about an hour. I'm looking for a little bit of char on all of the vegetables that are in here. All right, so it's actually been a little bit over an hour and I'm tired of waiting, but we do have a little bit of char on these veggies, which is going to contribute to lots of flavor. And also the roasting of especially the tomatoes has allowed them to release a lot of their juices, which is going to increase the flavor. So at this point, what I'm gonna do is take my slotted spoon and move over all the veggies into this pot here. It's fine if some of the liquids come over, but I'm trying to drain a lot of it off. I did take the outside paper off of the garlic and the onions, but the peppers and the tomatoes are gonna have their skins and their seeds. Now to the roasted vegetables, I'm going to add a good heaping glug of lime juice. I've got some honey here from our bees, probably about a 1/4 cup, maybe a 1/3 cup is what I'll add. And And now I'm gonna blend this up into the salsa. So it's going to be more like a restaurant style salsa where it's a little bit smaller texture, not as chunky, but we really like it. So instead of just putting this immersion blender down in and just continually blending the whole thing, I'm not really looking for a smooth sauce. I am looking for it to have a little bit of texture. I'm just gonna put the immersion blender down in and kind of pulse it. I'm just gonna stir it a little bit, and as I stir I can see, you know, bigger chunks of onions or whatever that just need a little bit of blitzing. That's the texture that we have. Now there's one more ingredient to add before we jar it up, and that is cilantro. Now, because we live somewhere where it's really hot, our tomatoes and peppers and things come in at a different time than our cilantro. So this cilantro was ready to be harvested much earlier in the year. And so I did that. I harvested it and put it in the freeze dryer. And now we can just mix it into the salsa. At this point, I don't really actually activate the blender. I just use it to stir with instead of trying to dirty another dish. And there we go. That helps it look more like salsa. This is kind of orange because I had a lot of orange tomatoes, but it's going to be delicious. So this is not an approved canning recipe. I am going to can it up because I'm comfortable with it. If you're not comfortable canning this up because it hasn't been tested, this does freeze very well. Very good. That's delicious. I like to taste my salsas before I can them up because sometimes I guess it kind of depends on the peppers really and how much rain we've gotten, or if I have accidentally overwatered in there or something. But sometimes the salsa comes out hotter and sometimes it comes out more mild, and I like to be able to label the tops of the jars accordingly. I'm going to be using my Fruit Saver steam canner today. I absolutely love steam canning as opposed to water bath canning. Things go much faster when you have a steam canner. And I don't mean that to say the canning times go faster, because when you use a steam canner, you will can using the water bath timing, but this will heat up a lot faster than like a big pot of water, and it saves water. So it's nice. I really like it. Hello, it is the 5th and I just got done milking the goats. I am going to set up some chevre today, but this is not actually the preservation task of the day. Earlier this morning I strained out the bone broth and got that put in the canner. Bone broth is a low acid food, so it has to be pressure canned, and I don't can up every last drop of broth that we make here because my jars are precious to me with having dairy animals. I'd rather have the jars for milk. We do go through bone broth pretty fast, so it's not necessarily a big deal to put it in jars, but when I can, I like to freeze dry it because it condenses down the volume quite a lot. Now, I'm not going to be getting as much milk today as we normally do because lovely Miss Breezy kicked over the bucket mid-milking today. They don't do that very often, but on occasion they do. We would have gotten probably a little bit more than a gallon's worth, and we have a little bit, you know, less than a gallon's worth today. It wasn't too bad. It's gonna spill. I'm making a mess. I always do. I try not to sweat it because it's basically endless. It's just part of my personality, I guess. I always say make a mess or it doesn't count. And the reason that I say that is I have seen in my personal life and on, you know, social media and things, cases where things go wrong, and a lot of times it can just completely ruin your day. And I get it. Sometimes that's the last thing, like the straw that broke the camel's back. But if we can try to not let the little things get to us and understand that we all have these little mistakes on a daily basis, then maybe it won't get to us so bad and we can keep moving on despite that. I've got the chevre all set up. I could strain this tomorrow. I could strain this in a couple days. We'll see how I feel. And the end goal for this chevre is to go into ice cream. So can't wait. I probably won't wait a couple days to strain it at that rate. So over here, let me turn on the light. These are the bone broth quarts that I canned up earlier this morning. One of them didn't seal, but that's okay. This is what I'm going to be putting in the freeze dryer, and I'll put that in there too. You know, this broth is pretty well cool at this point. You could load warm food into the freeze dryer if you felt like it. It's just going to take the freeze dryer that much longer to cool things down. There is very little fat on the top of this broth. The fat that was formed when the broth formed was put into those cans that we canned this morning, and that's okay. That's gonna last a good long while on the shelf. I know that I'll probably use that broth within about 6 months. I've kept jars of tallow and things room temperature for a couple of years and they've tasted great, but they do suggest that you skim the fat off, both for canning and for freeze drying. There's very little fat in here, so this is gonna be fine. You are not magnetic, really? Oh, I thought the freeze dryer was magnetic. So when you're loading the freeze dryer with liquid, you want to put the trays in here first instead of trying to walk around with trays that have liquid in them. It's just a recipe for disaster to try to balance those. And you also don't want to pull the trays out super far when you go to load them, because the weight of the broth will make this tip, and obviously that's bad news too. So I'm just going to pull these out a tiny bit. Probably make a little bit of a mess. Remember, make a mess or it doesn't count. Because I've freeze dried quite a few different liquids in here, I know that I can fit a ½ gallon per tray. I don't quite have 2.5 gallons to put in here today, so I am going to try to divvy it up relatively evenly. This is going to take a couple days, probably. This is going in here as liquid, and it's actually quite warm. It says 93 degrees. It's gonna freeze that way down, and then the pump is gonna turn on and suck out all the moisture. I'm gonna guess about 2 days. So it might get in this video, but it also might go on the next one for the challenge. Hello, welcome back to my kitchen for day 6 of the challenge. And today we're gonna do something that I've never done before. This year I started growing roasting peppers because I've been watching the garden tours and food preservation videos of my fellow YouTube friends, and every year that Sarah at Living Traditions Homestead or Jess at Roots and Refuge, every time they harvest and then roast peppers, I just want to taste it through the screen. Obviously it doesn't work that way, so in order to taste it, I've got to do it myself. So I have quite a few peppers here. I just picked these 2 this morning. These ones are the Corno del Toro, and then these ones I picked probably almost a week ago. They're starting to get a little bit wilty. These were in a bag in the refrigerator. These guys are Marconi peppers. I've also got a couple other random peppers here. This one is a yellow pepper. The name of this one is Yellow Monster. It is supposed to be bigger. I just don't have that great of a nutrition in my greenhouse right now. And then these ones are Pippin's Golden Honey, which these do get bigger as well. So what we're gonna do in order to roast these peppers is I need to preheat my oven to 450. And then what I need to do is actually cut all these open and de-seed them. I am going to be roasting them with the skins on. Those will come off later. This is one of the peppers that was in the fridge. Whoop. There we go. Cut it in half, take out the seeds. I'm gonna set it down on my baking tray here. Try not to get seeds in your coffee. That just looks beautiful, doesn't it? So I've got a full tray here, obviously skin side up. And the whole point of this is to get these charred and blistered on the top. It's gonna help release the flavors inside the peppers, reduce down that moisture that's in them to help improve the flavor, but also charring the tops of the skin like this will help them peel a lot easier. I've never tried to peel a pepper, but that's what you do when you roast them. Because the whole goal is to blister these and my oven isn't quite preheated yet, I'm not so worried about putting them in a little bit early, like before this is preheated. If these happen to get basically broiled, because the preheating does heat the oven up from the top pretty hot, that's not going to hurt anything in this case, so I'm going to put them in early. And now they're going to be in the oven till they're nice and black and bubbly on the top. I have no idea when my timer beeped, but the kids came in the house and they said, "Mom, what are you cooking?" Well, I think they're done. I'd say those are good and black and bubbly, wouldn't you? So in order to get the skins to release from the pepper. It's best to kind of pack them in a vessel with a lid on top or a cloth, something to help trap the steam in there. Can you see the steam rising off of these guys? So I'm just gonna pack them in this cast iron and put the lid on, and I could let them cool completely. The goal is to leave them in here for about 20-ish minutes until they are handleable, and then you can peel them. But I may leave them in here a little bit longer than that just because. All right, so we are gonna finish what we started yesterday. This is day 7. And I think that all I'm gonna do with these peppers that we roasted is stick them in the freezer for now. I was going to peel off the charred bit and lovingly roll it up and put it in the freezer for a later date when I would potentially freeze dry it, but more than likely just blitz it up and put it in something like roasted red pepper Alfredo. But truthfully, these crisped up so much that a lot of the meat is very, very flat, and to try to peel off the charred bit like you're supposed to, it would basically leave me with nothing. So these are quite black on them. You know, they don't smell too bad. I think in the right application this could work very well. It still smells sweet, so I don't think all hope is lost. I just think I'm done with this particular project. So we're gonna put these in the freezer. That is preservation. And as far as today goes, on the 7th, our freeze dryer is done. There we go. I have squeezed out as much of the air as I can from the bag, and I have properly labeled it charred peppers instead of roasted. They are charred. I had to collect all my goodies. We're going out to the shed. So the freeze dryer was actually done a couple hours ago. Because I knew that I was going to be coming out and taking it out, I just increased the dry time. Not because I felt like this wasn't dry enough, but it just keeps everything warm. What the freeze dryer does is it cools everything down, and then as the freeze dryer works, it does heat everything back up. Right now the trays are at 126 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's nice and warm. What I really didn't want to happen is it to cool down and then me have to reheat the trays again in order to pull them back out, because if I pull them out cold, there's going to be condensation that collects on the trays, and that can really affect things. We want things to stay super dry, so I'm just going to click cancel. And back here I need to open up the drain. So this is what freeze-dried bone broth looks like. It's like meat styrofoam. So I do want to get this packed up as quickly as possible. Any humidity in the air is going to automatically get sucked into this bone broth, and I don't want that. I want it to stay as dry as possible. It's going to keep much longer. Here's another look at it. And I've done a video where I freeze-dried bone broth before and tasted it. It is so incredible. My mouth waters every single time because the flavor is super concentrated. And when you do this, it not only saves space in your jars, but also you can kind of tailor the concentration of your rehydrated broth. So if maybe my broth seemed a little bit weak when I put it in the freeze dryer, I don't have to add as much water to it after it's freeze dried, and I can get a more concentrated flavor, which I really like that. It's essentially like making our own bouillon too. So as you can see, I'm using my pickle pounder. This is one of my fermentation tools, just to crunch everything down. The hope is to get all 5 trays packed down into this half-gallon jar. Every time I freeze dry something liquid like milk or even eggs, and especially bone broth too, I'm always amazed at how much is left behind. Like, you always hear about all the good things that are in bone broth, and you can visualize it here. The freeze dryer has taken out the water and everything else is left behind. So there's a lot of good things in bone broth. I think we're gonna make it. We're gonna be able to stuff it all in here. Now what I would like to do to preserve this for the somewhat long term is to vacuum seal it. So if I wanted to preserve this for longer than about 5 years, what I would want to do is put it in a Mylar bag like this, something like this, with an oxygen absorber. Like this, many foods that are freeze-dried can last up to 25 years. Now, because I didn't skim the fat off of this would probably have a less than that shelf life. Plus, I know I'm going to be using this within the next 5 years, so at least that's the plan. So I like to do the jars when I can. And with the jars, instead of doing an oxygen absorber, I just throw in a desiccant pack. This is going to suck out any of the moisture that may have been in the air. It's been very humid here lately, so I'm sure that there is some. This is a food grade desiccant pack, and that's going to retain all the moisture that could be in here into that desiccant pack, so our food doesn't spoil. So I've got my food saver vacuum sealer over here. I'm making sure that the rim doesn't have anything on it. Doesn't look like it does. I have a new canning lid. What I have here is this neat little lid with this tube. This is going to turn my vacuum sealer that I use for the bags, like we did with the rabbit, into something that I can use to vacuum seal jars. We need power. Where's the power? My vacuum sealer has been trying to give up for a little while. We might be there. Like, I think there's something wrong with the power cord. Plan B. Plan B. I've got a plan B. You always have to have a plan B. I think it'll work. I hope it'll work. Hang on. Okay, I have this portable, rechargeable little vacuum seal doohickey too. So I'm just gonna set that on the top. There's a little hole in the top. And we'll see if it works. Oh yeah, it's working. What I'm looking at is the contents of the jar usually will kind of lift up when the air is being sucked out. This doesn't have like an automatic turn off. They have them that will automatically stop when things are well sealed. I just have to guess. Okay. Okay, phew! Have a plan B. I need to order a new one of these. There we go. Preservation day 7, all done.